You're listening to the voice of IWA Flip on Play Your Way. Oh, man. Today, special guest in studio. 8-time IWA Singles World Champion, the leader of the 5-time Stable Wars winners. Ace Hole himself, Howie Sandberg. Howie, welcome to the show, bro.
So appreciate you having me on the show. The original Ace Hole is here. Appreciate the opportunity to utilize this forum to speak to the IWA masses and all the fine managers that are still playing the game, 80 managers that aren't playing the game anymore, and giving them a career retrospective, a look into myself and the Alliance of Championship Excellence. Deep dive, digging pretty good here, maybe enlighten the masses on some things that they have no idea about. So thank you for having me.
Now, I think I said this right before we hit record. You are the official and officially the first retired manager I get on. So I hope this opens up the doors to other managers that have since moved on, and managers to come on and use this platform to share their IWA history and their story. Because as you know, there are still quite a few managers playing. I think it's a healthy thing to have the history, behind this wonderful game, put out there, because, yeah, you know what, if you don't know the history, you're just gonna end up repeating yourselves, and yeah, let's not do that. I think I think having you on this show, Howie, is gonna really open up some doors, brother.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I am excited to tell my story. A lot of people know, some of it, some more than others. There's a lot that's untold, and I've determined that I'm ready today to spill the beans on anything and everything. There's nothing that's off topic. We can get into everything, and you're right, this game has a great and rich history, a lineage of so many managers, so many legends in this game, and whether you're in the game today or you're retired, I know there are managers out there that I would love to hear their stories, and that kind of prompted me to reach out to you to tell my story. So here we are today.
Yeah. Now, I think we've decided, because as we started kind of like chopping it up, kind of pregame, this story is going to be a couple of episodes long, because the Howie Sandberg story comes in chapters, brother. And as much as I want to put it all on one show, I think it'll be healthier if we kind of like break it up into chapters. So I think we're in agreement. I think we'll chop it up into a couple of shows, give the IWA audience time to kind of see what's going on, see what's coming to the next show. And I think where better to start than how you found out about the game, brother.
Yeah, I think this is the best way to do it, because there really is a lot of ground to cover, and it can be looked at in 3 parts: the 1990s to the point, probably about 94 to 97. And then 97, my brother was kicked out of the IWA, which we'll cover in great detail. And the International Wrestling Federation, which I opened, and at the time that soon after, when Jay was kicked out, which admittedly was retaliation, and there were a lot of ill feelings at the time. And then, of course, 2006 to 2010, which was my second run in the game. But to answer your question, my good friend, my best friend, since I was 10 years old, Randy Mercado, picked up an issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, saw an ad for the IWA. He was the first to try it. He joined the European League or some sort of Rebel League? It was in Steel Federation. And soon after he was telling us about it, my brother and I, so I joined a league called the Coffin Filler League in the CFL and the Gold Federation. My first wrestler, very originally named Hitman Howie Sandberg, not very creative.
Nice, nice. Now, I mean, obviously, I mean, goes without saying, I guess. You're a wrestling fan, yes?
Yeah, I was always a huge Bret Hart guy. Yeah, I was a big wrestling fan back then. I still keep up with it time to time now, but it's more casual, more into AEW probably than the other
Okay.
federations. But yeah.
Nice. So here you are, Hitman is now in the Coffin Filler League. Did they have federations back in those days, or?
Yeah, so back then they had the iron, they had the gold, they had the steel, they had the diamond. They did not have the bronze, but they had the jade federation as well. So I guess it was what, five federations instead of six back then.
Huh, okay. Um, but the game was definitely working on a different on a different I guess on different structure. I mean, it wasn't as structured as it is today, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it was different. The One of the big differences back then, the hold values were, in my opinion, more predictable than the 2000s. I assume, you know, now as well. At least it felt like it was more predictable. Um,
Now they weren't. This isn't. Did I? Is this? I know for a long time I've heard stories of. I don't know if it was the '90s or maybe even just before the '90s where they would use the same hold for iron as they did for jade. Is that
I don't remember that. I remember different hold values for different federations.
okay? So they had already had that randomized in the '90s.
Right, right. You had a lot of the things, when I came back in 2006, the landscape of the game was completely different than how I recalled it being in the 90s. In the 90s, you didn't have this level of flooding. You had managers, if they had a big roster, maybe a manager had 40 wrestlers, which I think would be pushing it as a big roster. And the game was very different back, when I started. Um, and when I started in the CFL, it was just in league trash talk, and then I discovered a whole underworld, underground, if you want to call it that I didn't even know existed when I received a pen pal letter in the mail from a guy named Mike Pasiga. And Mike was a prominent manager in a power group at the time called Myths and Legends. And I guess Mike had taken notice of what I was doing in the CFL, and I had added a few more leagues. Must have made the IWA report a few times. Otherwise, I don't think he definitely wouldn't have noticed. And then I started talking with Mike, and that's really where I started to realize, wow, this IWA is a lot more than just the CFL, right?
Right.
And it opened my eyes to, man, this is interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember my '90s, and I think I told you. I mean, I must have played for a few cycles because I sent in a couple pieces of trash talk, crossing my fingers to get something, that someone writing back, I guess, and nothing really, ever, came about because I was in, quote unquote, a rookie league that I had no idea I was in at the time because, like I said, I was just naive to the game. I had no idea there was only two or three people there, and I was trash talking to the scrubs, and I'm like, why aren't these guys writing back? But yeah, like I said, you live and you learn.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, brother.
But now, so now this Mike guy messages you back and says, "Hey, I got a secret group," or how does that play out?
Yeah, so I was aware of Myths and Legends because they were one of the power groups that would hit the IWA report on a fairly consistent basis. And Mike was an interesting guy for those that know him. Also from New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, and at the time I was living in Brooklyn. He's from Ozone Park in Queens. He had a very thick Italian accent. I'm not going to try to replicate it, but he had a definite macho bravado about him, and I think it started out that he took notice of us. He was in M&L, but he noticed, we had ace initials. We put up the ace initials, and we had some managers that weren't well known. In all honesty, we were just like, some guys like in league that had joined us, a guy by the name of Tom Flesher from upstate New York, a guy by the name of Lee Greenwood, and some managers, quite frankly, that weren't well known, that weren't necessarily the greatest managers in the world, but it was just, on a small scale. And I don't recall if Mike ever tried to recruit us for M&L. I don't think he did. I think he was interested in us joining forces, and Mike was the first big name that joined Ace. So in many ways, I have to credit Mike for giving us some sort of legitimacy. When you get that big name in your group, people start to take notice. The other, big groups at the time. So your IPF, your Hot Bodies, HB, some of the big name managers at the time in these other groups. HB consisted of AJ Honold. He was their leader, one of the all-time greats. Steve Beckwith, the Bell brothers, who are in the man cave community, which is pretty damn cool. ID, Intellectual Dynasty, was another big, well-renowned group, including the likes of Gene Boyer, Brian Kitcher, Jay Reynolds, and I'm probably forgetting others. IPF was Ken Lee and Derek Bergen and some other guys, and so it was this big battleground, right, of power groups competing to dominate the IWA report. What I didn't realize is this underground community, and people would actually call each other on the telephone. This is like 94, 95, 96, and try to recruit each other, try to play politics. If you're Kevin Hurley, plant seeds of doubt or dissension that will need to be over. And but Mike it gave us legitimacy. Mike was a big name, and
it's interesting. I was waiting to finally hear somebody that I knew, and finally that's why I chuckled when you said Kevin Hurley, because I think it was my second comeback back in 2011, where I actually teamed up with Kevin for a short bit. But yeah, that's what, it's just, to me, it amazes me as to how many people are in this game. I think the other day we were talking with a few of the other commissioners, and one of them mentioned how there's just in counting people that hit the report last year alone, there was over 100 people that were playing this game, and that's just the ones that hit the report, bro. So there's still 100 plus people in this game, and I only know of a few, of a handful that I've got to interact with over the last couple of years. But yeah, there's so many people that come through this game, bro. That's amazing. I mean, shout out to Kevin Hurley for being the one. How they say they have that 6 degrees of separation. It's like there's definitely still a degree of contact here. So that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And Kevin was a shit stirrer. Kevin made life very difficult. He was a manager who liked planting seeds, liked starting rumors, and he would often try to create doubt that your stablemate was going to screw you over.
That what, I was waiting for that, because now here's one thing I think that we got to make clear. Okay, and this is perfect for it right now, because again, there's a lot of ways to play this game. Whether it's the at large, like you're talking right now, because you're talking like, I don't want to say that you're but Kevin was actually like putting doubt, like, hey, you know what, Howie's going to turn his back on you, Phil. You better watch out. Is that the kind of stuff you would get? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely, and you're right. no right or wrong way to play this game. In fact, I could argue that Kevin got the most bang for his buck out of any manager in IWA history because often he wasn't even spending any money or sending in strategies. He would get satisfaction just from stirring shit up, planting doubts and starting rumors and causing dissension, and he'd get off on that. And hey, man, that's
But
not.
within the gameplay, it was, hey, it's this is still a freaking game. It's like that's what people got to understand. It's like if I'm trying to get you to sign matches against me, and that works, then that's awesome. Yeah, like I said, shout out to Kevin Hurley for gaining some free matches there.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so getting back to Mike, Mike was the first big name manager, and how we built Ace really was by taking from the other supergroups. So Unholy Brotherhood, I can't believe I left them out before. They were a superpower. Legendary managers, Kevin DeFranco, Jim Adelson, the Ho brothers, Costa Estafiou, the list, it goes on and on and on. And even Jason Miller, who will cover probably in part two because he's more well known, I think, for his second run as well in the 2000s. So what we did was we took from UB, and we Kevin joined the brothers joined us, and Costa joined us. We took from ITF, Sante joined from also, in addition to Mike, we took that really.
Now, Howie, I'm gonna stop you right there because your phone's cutting in and out a little bit, brother. So maybe we gotta catch up a little on the signal. But you were saying what were the other people from IFT?
Oh yeah, so from IPF, Tony Passante.
Oh yeah, there's a name I know. Yeah.
Yeah, great manager for sure. I covered the UB guys, Costa, Kevin DeFranco, the Ho brothers, Ben Iannarelli from M&L. These guys later came after Mike. But, what was happening at this time is we really started gaining credibility because we were winning so damn much. And that's how we were able to pull these guys from these other groups because, quite frankly, we weren't, my brother and I, and Randy especially, they wouldn't have had any interest whatsoever in joining us. And a lot of this recruiting was done via back channels, right? Just telephone calls. This is what Mike Basiga exposed us to, this whole underground. So all of a sudden we're talking to Ben Iannarelli in Ohio. We're talking to, Kevin DeFranco in upstate New York. And I left out Zach Mercier from Unholy Brotherhood as well. He was certainly a big part of this. I can't believe I left him out. So we're taking the best of the best from these supergroups and turning it into an even bigger supergroup in the Alliance of Championship Excellence. And that's how this was built. Now, in the process, we are becoming very, very hated because nobody likes somebody that's winning so much. And my brother and I were winning so much that people thought we were cheating. They'd swear, well, they've got to be cheating. There's no way people can be winning this much. So originally IPF, which arguably was the standard, and they were the heels. Well, Ace, we were becoming, or had now become the big villains in the game. Everybody hated us. And of course we fed into that persona in the bulletins and whatnot. So
Now, at this time, obviously, we're talking, at large, so the trash talking, was it mostly in league, trash talking, or was it like on a bulletin board? Was it, so I mean, obviously nowadays you can go on social media, you go on Facebook, there's all these groups dedicated to certain leagues, certain groups dedicated to old school to new school stuff. So you have kind of an avenue where you can go and talk smack. But you're talking 1990. I mean, was it just primarily just in bulletin stuff?
It was primarily in bulletins. We would send in trash talk. We were in all the money leagues and all the big leagues where all the key managers were in. So, for example, anybody who was anybody was in the money leagues back then. And we would send in trash talk that would of course brag about how awesome we are, right, and how everybody's beneath us, and all the things that make somebody a great heel. But there was also an outside publication. I forget if it was Derek Bergen or Derek Nordio or somebody. There was something called I Magazine, which was really, really awesome because
Oh, nice. That's the first time I heard of that one. The I magazine.
oh, it was uncensored, so you could say really whatever you wanted, and it was a great outlet as well. And ironically, that's where my brother got into some trouble with the IWA because he went off on them in an article about all the mistakes that they were making. This was closer to the end though, so we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves, but he didn't like all the mistakes they were making with data entry for the strategies and whatnot. But the short of it is, most of it was in league trash talk.
Right, and now most of it was manager to manager, like hey, or was it still character based, like in league stuff?
It was mostly manager to manager. So, for example, Hitman Howie Sandberg declares, all of you scrubs in the IPS that are left standing after we decimated your group, I hope you're taking notice. We're really owning the IWA report, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So stuff like that. I'm, of course, paraphrasing, but
Right, no, and I mean, and we mentioned before we hit record, how everything goes to its era, to that was what was happening in the 90s. It's like, whether you want to believe it or not, that was the style. I mean, I always look back, and I tell people, I go, I remember the IWA being ruthless. I remember, the IWA being cold hearted. I think that's why when I found it again, I was like, yes, it's still around. It's still around. Because it was that raw that raw aspect behind the IWA that was, something that attracted some people. It's like, hey, I can let loose, I can talk smack, and within this confine of a game.
The word that comes to mind is four letters. It starts with an S, and it is scam. Back then, you had a great deal of managers. You had some managers who were just interested in scamming other groups and just putting one over on them, and that's something that Kevin Hurley really liked to do, which made life difficult because as leader of Ace, and you've got all these big personalities, right? All this talent, and we were focused. Our primary and core focus was just dominating the IWA report. I personally, I took a lot of pride in doing other things, contributing to leagues, writing trash talk, and there's no right or wrong way to play the game. I was in leagues where I would run angles and run stories, and I was commissioner of the Rising Sun League and the Jade Federation, and I took a lot of pride in kind of being a hybrid manager. But for the group's core focus was, we want to dominate the IWA report. We want to be known as the greatest stable in this game that nobody can touch. But it was also challenging because when you've got the best of the best, really, you've got the personalities, you've got other managers trying to draw a wedge in between the group. How do we break this up, right? How do we stop this? If we can't beat them in the report, if we can't beat them in league, maybe we can plant some seeds of doubt. Maybe we can make them cause dissension within the group.
Right. Yeah.
And I was always very protective of Ace. I was always very connected. I'd speak on the phone with the guys, and it sounds really stupid, I'm sure, but try to keep them motivated. Like, hey, how you feeling about your strategies? Because we were so report focused, and like I said, I was very much the heel, but outside the game, I was also very much the heel. So some people know this. There's urban legend, which I'm going to confirm is not really urban legend, that back then it is true. If managers, and you'd never see this today, but if managers were not producing for Ace, we would define producing as hitting the IWA report on a fairly regular basis. We would kick people out. we would. So not only were a heel, or I was a heel. I was a heel within my own group. Um, you know,
Yeah. I mean, there was a standard. It's like, hey, you're done, bro. I don't want you with my initials. And it's funny you say that because, like I mentioned to you, when I started playing, in my little league that I was in, DI was like in league they were the shit. That was like DI was the shit. So and I couldn't get anything going. So I think I made a couple characters and I placed their initials on the fake characters that I made just to get a rise. I gave them silly names and next thing you know I get a pen pal and the one says you got to drop those initials. That's my that and I was like wow, people really give a flying what about their damn initials. But yeah, because people took it, serious. They don't want some scrub rocking their initials. That was the real big deal back in the days.
dude, same philosophy there. It's like if we want this group to be prestigious, we want the very best that this game has to offer. And if you're not producing at a level that is acceptable in our minds, and I say our, I really mean me, maybe other. Um, it wasn't a dictatorship in a sense, and there's a misconception that it was a dictatorship because there really wasn't. I mean, we would vote on these kind of things, but most managers would just defer and say, whatever, Howie, whatever you want to do. Most managers would be on board with it and kind of had the same philosophy, believe it or not. Maybe some more than others, but it was very, very cutthroat, but it made the group prestigious. And what I noticed when I came back in the 2000s is you'd have these groups where it was all about flooding. It was all about basically anybody could join any group that they wanted, and as long as you had a pulse, you could join a group because, hey, maybe you could hit the IWA report even if you suck, and then you're helping our bottom line. That's not how Ace was built. That's one way in which I think the game is changed. No disrespect to any stables that are out there from the 2000s or even today, but it was just a different time where I think being in a top group really meant something.
Oh yeah, no, I think I agree with you 1010 right there. Yeah, nowadays and again, I have open door policy, brother. You want to come on my show, you can come on. Let's talk. Help me understand the at-large game some more. I've made it to everyone in the game. Obviously, the majority of the people that I've had come on my show are most in-league players. Recently, I've started getting some, more at-large players, to come and, tell their side. But yeah, for the most part, it's like you're mentioning. It's like, hey, this is our group. We're gonna help each other out within the group to, like you said, to hit the report. But yes, it's still not to that level of what other people that I talk to that remember back in the days, it was all about it. It's like, hey, you know what? Like we mentioned Edge, like Edge. Like I remember when I came back in 2011, Edge was everywhere and nowhere at the same time because they were the only ones that were relevant. There wasn't anybody really competing against them until Virus decided to get their stuff together, and now Virus became, as far as I know, the last 5 or 6 years, it's they're untouchable right now. No one's really in any position to be as competitive as them today. Whether it's because no one's, like you said, gathered their masses, but or maybe that side of the game just isn't as popular today as it was back in those days.
Yeah, I'm sure the times are interesting today in many ways and similar yet different than they were back in the 90s and the 2000s. And it was definitely cutthroat. And let's, if we're being honest, it maybe was more cutthroat in Ace than other groups, but there were politics in every group, in all the big groups and all the big stables, and that isn't something that's unique to Ace. Maybe just accentuated somewhat, but it was cutthroat. You know, when you start talking about kicking out a manager who helped at least bring awareness to the initials, like Mike Pasiga, we kicked Mike Pasiga out and didn't blink or think twice about it because he was kind of cutthroat, right? Because he would talk about cash, but he wasn't very good as a manager, and I used to play good cop, bad cop at times, and you know, even though I was the bad guy, I was very much salesman. One of my former stablemates called me a used car salesman because he thought I could.
Nice. You're the Al Bundy of the IWA there.
And he meant it as a compliment, and I took it as a compliment. But I would often play good cop, and Zach Garcia would play bad cop. And we called Mike Pasiga one day, and I tried to make it sound, which is a lie. I tried to make it sound like I was trying to save Mike, but Zach just wasn't having any of it. We had a three-way call, and Zach was so cold to Mike. I told him we were going to have to let him go, and you know, Mike was upset, obviously, and you know, I got off the phone, and Zach and I we just started laughing to each other, and I was a different, of course, this is character, but you know, as a person, look, I was 19 years old, 20 years old at the time. 42 years old, I wouldn't be laughing at somebody else's expense like that. But
No,
look,
I think I think I got when I got on with Jeremy Nace, you know, I told him the same thing. I go, Jeremy, I go, we were kids. I mean, we were young adults. We were, you know, we were growing into, you know, who we are. We were having fun. I go, that's just the way, you know, young adults are. I go, that I don't expect to do that now at 40. I go, but yeah, we were different. You know, you grow out of that. But now, while I have you on, if I can pick your brain a little bit. So here you are in 1990 or in the 90s. You're playing this IWA game. You know, Ace is hitting. Is there or was there like a way to track the points? I mean, I know nowadays I forget the gentleman's name. Oh no, excuse me, Mike Cook. Mike Cook is keeping points for stables, and well, was there somebody tracking the points, or was there somebody tallying up the points for the end of the year?
That's a great question. Officially at the time, no. You know, we could measure success just based on looking at the IWA report back then, and you could see what stables were doing what. So official, I think years later, I don't even know who, quote unquote, invented a point system, but they went back to the old reports and tallied it all up and whatnot. But there wasn't anything official back then. But the managers that were into this kind of thing had a sense of, you know, who was the top group, who was the second group, and so on and so forth.
Like you said, it was easily, and it was apparent to everybody. Like, hey, you know, like when I came in 2011 or came back in 2011, yeah, I had no idea people were tallying up points. But like you're saying, I knew Edge was the shit. Like, there is no doubting that. I mean, there was nobody that was on any page more. There wasn't anybody that was on the report any more than they were. So even without knowing, I knew they were the top stable.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Sometimes you just know, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Like I mean, shout out to you know, Mike Cook, and I could even be wrong on that because I haven't officially ever talked to the man. This is just, you know, through people. I think it's Mike and somebody else that keep up the. It's a Facebook page called the Information Station. You familiar with the information station?
I am not.
I'll see if I send you a link to that one because they keep all the points for what's currently going on. So they keep manager of the year, stable of the year. I mean, they do an amazing job of tracking like how many battle royals are in each league, how many cards, how many active managers are. I mean, they keep everything, brother,
Nice.
everything. So I mean, it is a different, like I said, there is a different playing field nowadays. So the transparency is there. So if you're saying, hey, I am the number one point getter, period. And shout out to Frank Belcher, who I think has won it 3 years in a row. And like I said, it is a different time and era, and I think obviously social media and the information tracking is at an all-time high right now, and hopefully one of these days I can get Mike and them on so he can talk a little more about when he started doing all these tallies. But Howie, here we are in the '90s. You've just kicked out one of the persons that helped you kind of bring some recognition to Ace and Mike. What happens? What happens next? You guys continue to dominate in the '90s. You give it up for a while.
Yeah, so we called it trimming the fat. We
Nice.
referred to it as, and we were rolling. We were definitely rolling. And around this time period, we introduced a sub-stable, a kind of a minor league system called, well, it started as the Universal Terror Clan, UTC. I think it became the XTC just because the initial sounded little cooler. And what this consisted of were managers who were eager to prove themselves and that were interested in one day becoming a part of ACE. And they would join XTC. They didn't look at it as a slight or slap in the face or anything negative, but they looked at it as a proving ground. And the way we positioned it was, if you're a part of XTC, you're more liable or more likely to get the call up to the main group than if you were just on the outside. So that was something very unique, and I'm not going to say it's the only time it's ever been done in IWA history, but to my knowledge, I had not seen it before, and I certainly, definitely in my comeback, I didn't see anything like that whatsoever. So at this point, we're really rolling. When did things start to change? Is probably the question. And I would have to say, see, this is around from '95 and '96. It's everything was ACE in the IWA report. In 2000, yeah, it's like 1997 is where things started to get more difficult. And the reason for that is, well, there's several reasons. One, more and more people and managers started complaining that we were winning too much, which would in turn put great deal of heat on Johnny B and the office because they did not think we were good for business. It's what happens. People get frustrated. Seeing people are winning over and over again. Managers quit. It's just, I can totally understand how that would not be good for business. Simultaneously, my brother and I, especially my brother, but myself as well, are getting more outspoken about, as we're heels, as we're supposed to do, but outspoken about errors with IWA, strategies, and misentering information in their system, which would lead, screw you out of a major in the IWA report. And they caught wind of this. It was iMagazine, which I had mentioned before, on which my brother had written an article that Johnny B got his hands on. The third is around this time, I'm sorry, I just got my dog barking in the background here. The third around this time is we did lose a few managers to a rival group. This was actually pretty late, but we lost Zach Mercier to a rival group called SOB. Jerry Martin, who was an integral part of the group from Dungeon Masters originally, he had also left the group. And meanwhile, you've got Kevin Hurley doing his magic act to try and, ascension within the ranks. So it's kind of threefold when this started to go off the rails a bit.
Did I lose you?
Oh, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah. I heard it die down for a little bit. I was like, oh, did I lose him? No, I hear you.
So no worries. So this is now in 1997, and all the meanwhile there's a famous series in IWA lore. It's called the Ace versus Ken Lee series, and Ken Lee was a member of IPF, and he hated us, which is fine. That was what we were trying to do, is get people to love. Ken did not like us. We had taken many pieces of IPF, and IPF was no longer the same group that it had previously been. So this did not make Ken very happy. And
now I've heard the name Ken Lee before. Ken Lee was a commissioner in a lot of leagues, right?
Was he? I don't.
Or maybe
I remember Ken, encountering him in many of the money leagues, and he was definitely well regarded and well respected manager. But I mean, it's possible. I don't recall.
Yeah, I've heard the name before. I'll have to listen back to where I've heard it before. But yeah, I think he was like one of the and I don't even want to start. But yeah, no, go ahead. So Ken Lee is upset because you've taken some of his players and kind of took his luster.
Yeah, so Ken challenges us to an IWA-wide series. It's Ken Lee versus Ace. It's 7 different managers in Ace versus Ken Lee. And the premise behind the series is that if Ken wins, then Ace is going to I'm pretty sure, my memory isn't always great, but I'm pretty sure the premise was if Ken wins, Ace disbands. I think that was, Kevin Hurley can probably confirm. And if Ace won, Ken Lee would retire. Yeah, Ken Lee would retire. And this series was extremely close. But it was interesting because while it was close, it was also lopsided. It lopsided in a sense that the managers in Ace that defeated Ken won decisively. So my brother won in either 4 or 5. These were all these were singles matches. And they would take place in different leagues within different federations. So my brother won in 4 or 5. Randy Mercado won in 4 or 5. Ken's brother, Ken, won.
I think I've lost you again.
Oh, sorry. Let me back up there. They were decisive series. My brother won in 4 or 5 matches. Randy Mercado won in 4 or 5 matches. But they were also decisive in the other direction. Ken, I think, swept Ben Iannarelli, and but it was close. The overall series was close in a sense that it was something. It was basically 3 to 3, and there was something in that area. There was a 6 or 7 series that was pending. My series with him in the Diamond Federation was extremely tight, and Jerry Barden had a 3-0 lead on Ken. But then Jerry left to join a group with Zach Garcia, and this is where Kevin Hurley had his hand in because he got Jerry to leave, and the series was basically thrown out. I mean, it never concluded, even though it was up 3-0 because Jerry was no longer an ace. But this time, the water's there, and you've got my series that's kind of balanced. To the best of my recollection, this series never concluded because my brother was kicked out of the IWA.
Now, Howie, I'm gonna cut you. I'm gonna cut you right there because your phone is cutting out pretty badly right now. It sounds like you're in an airport.
Oh boy, I'm good.
So I'm not sure if you were covering the mic up right there. I heard it, but it was like all the way. It sounded like you were in the hallway down the hall. But
where do we get cut off? I don't want to bore people, but where did
yeah, I think I officially lost you now.
Oh, no good.
Oh, no. Yeah, yeah, it's cutting out pretty badly right now, but I did hear that the series was tight. You know, he swept you, or he swept one of your guys, and the other series were very tight, but then it started fainting out.
Right. Okay. Can you hear me all right now? I could just quickly rehash if you can hear me.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There you are.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so yeah, it was tight in both directions, and there was my series with Ken was still hanging in the balance. Jerry was up 3-0, but he left Ace to join a group called SOB with Zach Mercier, who had since left Ace. And Kevin Hurley, of course, had a hand in all this. So Jerry's series was thrown out because he was no longer in Ace. It was very complicated, muddied waters. And all around this time, my brother is now kicked out of the IWA. He had won the series, but he's kicked out. So I never finished my series with Ken because once he was kicked out, the hell with this, and I left as well. So 1997, this is where things start to go off the rails.
Nice. So now like you said, your brother had gotten kicked out because of that the little piece he was kind of not, I don't want to say bad mouthing, but just calling them out on their errors.
Correct. Correct.
Nice. Now I mean I I guess I got to be careful because I call them out from time to time on my show. I mean, I hope they are listening from time to time. I do it to do it, just to raise attention to the managers to be careful to double check their strats. Don't just send them in and and because the IWA is human. I mean, they are human. They do make mistakes. I've gotten caught up in some of the mishaps, but you know, and again, some managers take it better than others. I remember I got to some points where I was as frustrated, similar to your brother. I was just like, "Are you kidding me? Like I'm spending money and these people are messing up my strats. Yeah, I get it. It's just a game and I shouldn't really take it this way, but now I'm throwing in money into the equation, and I wanted to make sure that other managers knew to double check their stuff because yeah, you never know. Mistakes do happen.
Yeah, it can be frustrating, especially if the error costs you an IWA major in the report. In retrospect, we were kids at the time, right? And we were like, 19, 20 years old. And how we went about it then compared to today, I'm sure would be completely different. But a part of that was we were heels and we were bad guys. And we wanted to generate heat. And, you know, um, but the office, I'm sure, looked at it differently. And they, like these Sandbergs, they're pains in the asses. And those sons of bitches that win all this stuff, and all they do is complain, and this isn't even good for business. And I can look back and I can understand it from their side. Also, in retrospect, though, it could have been and should have been done differently. And I'll preface it by saying Johnny B was a great man. He was a great guy. I had many conversations, not many, but I had a handful of conversations with him on the phone, and he was a good man. And
Nice. You know what? That's the first time I've ever heard. I mean, you actually got to talk to the man.
yeah, I did. I remember, he said, man, you guys are getting so good at this. How do you do it? And I explained to him some of our techniques, like mirror imaging for tag and 6-man and different strategies, which Jay and I, my brother, just discovered on our own. A lot of the greats already knew this stuff, but he was a lot of fun to talk to. He was genuinely a nice guy. But how it all transpired really should have been done differently. My brother was notified via a note in one of the bulletins that IWA no longer provided service to him.
Oh, wow. So they didn't even reach out to him formally, even though he was, talking to you. He didn't reach out formally and said, "Hey, you know what? Either you cut this out." They just blatantly told him you're no longer allowed.
Exactly, right on, Phil. Yeah, it was a big shock. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was a big surprise, and I can't help but feel if phone call, because we did speak with Johnny B on several occasions. A phone call to discuss maybe a warning, like, look, if you're this outspoken and we're doing such a poor job, maybe you might want to rethink playing, or if you keep doing this, we're gonna refuse service. But none of that happened, and that was disappointing because I loved the IWA. I still love the IWA. Hey, we're talking about IWA today on the podcast. And, I wonder what could have and would have happened if everyone just came together and just talked about it.
Yeah, no, you know what? I've said that a couple of times on the show, and if we can leave this show at this, and then I'll let you get the last word in. But I think the social media aspect has allowed for that kind of talking and that kind of communication. I mean, where an exclusive group, back in the days, like you said, would reach out and talk to you. Nowadays there's just so much more interacting that it's allowed even like the angle-based leagues to develop into, you know, or the continuity is there. We have more continuity with within each in league play, so we can work angles together better. The product is just better in league nowadays, I think, than it was and has been ever. I mean, the in league stuff just thrives with the with the social media aspect now. But yeah, it's just I mean, obviously, everybody's is going to play their own way still, but just having the ability to look back a little bit and hear from managers like yourself that got your perspective in the game, bases, you have to base it on the time period that you played. I mean, you had the luxury of playing in the 90s to see that that growth that you're talking, and saw a young game at the time. I mean, because it started what, 86, 87?
Yeah, I think around 86. Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys were, the game was still in its infant stages, and I think managers like you and situations that happened back in those days helped mold the game that we're currently playing now.
Yeah, I think very fundamentally in any walk of life, anything that you do, communication is everything. Communication is key. And for whatever reason, there was not that dialogue between the IWA and my brother, maybe even myself, about how they were feeling. And again, it's their business. It's their right to service or not service someone. But it was disappointing because obviously we were very passionate about it, about the game. We loved the game. It was a great outlet, a source of so much fun and enjoyment for us. And when it just came to, and there was no way I was going to continue playing with my brother no longer in the game. That felt wrong. But it was disappointing. It was unfortunate to say the least. And it ended just an amazing run. And that's the story from the 90s for Ace. Now, that story could have been even different had that not taken place. Basically, the IWA pulled the plug on Ace. That's how Ace ended that first run. It wasn't another group doing it. It wasn't another manager doing it. It wasn't done by me. It was done by the office. And that's the story. I think we can safely leave off here. I know we talked about it. I think a great part two would be the transition from the IWA to the IWS, which we opened, admittedly, as an alternative to the IWA because we were pissed off, yes. But we did pride ourselves in offering a different kind of product, which we'll talk about, than the IWA.
Nice.
And just a shout out, I don't know who's going to be listening to this, if any of my past stablemates are listening, but none of this could have been possible, certainly without my brother. To this day, I know, Phil, we talked offline about this a little bit, but I'm going to put my brother over huge here. He doesn't get anywhere near the credit he deserves. You know, when people think of Ace, they always think about me. Yes, I was the leader of the group, but my brother was an amazing manager, and he was better than me. He was brilliant in the strategies he would deploy. Some things I still think are revolutionary and nobody else has ever done. Definitely couldn't have accomplished what I did in the 2000s in Ace without him. Shout out to the guys I shared Ace with, including not relegated to Kevin DeFranco, Jerry Martin, the Ho brothers, Costa Stafiu, Tony Passante, Ben Iannarelli, rest in peace. He's no longer with us. I mentioned Jerry Martin, Bill James, anyone who I had the pleasure of teaming with and who contributed to making Ace what it was. I thank you sincerely. And it was a great time, the 90s version, and I hold dear to my heart. Obviously, we're talking about it here today, and I'm very much looking forward to part 2. And part 3, I think, for a lot of people will be maybe the most interesting and compelling part of this story, because it's the transformation of the supreme heel to becoming the babyface protagonist. So to 2010, and it's a little more modern as well. And I know there's a lot of folks and managers out there today that remember that more than the 90s, and will hopefully see value and learn a lot of things like, oh shit, so that's how they did it.
Well, no, that's definitely a good cliffhanger. Like I said, keep these managers coming back, listening. Now, we're gonna go ahead and sign this one off, Howie. Again, I know you got your shout outs in. Managers listening, if you got this far, stay tuned for part 2 of the legendary Howie Sandberg. Howie, we're gonna go ahead and sign this one off. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, I can't wait to get you back on and chop up number 2, because yeah, like I said, I'm intrigued. I definitely enjoy it, and I hope this. Like I said, I'll make sure we post this instantly, and hopefully people in the man cave react, and we can get some more of them on here as well. Like I said, I want to hear. Like I said, this is your perspective, your side of it. Like I said, I want everybody that wants to get on. I hope we can get more managers that quote unquote, are retired on, and share their story from their perspective.
Absolutely, brother. My pleasure. I look forward to part 2 and part 3 upcoming.
Nice. Okay, guys, you've been listening to Play Your Way here with IWA Flip and the legendary Howie Sandberg. Till next time, we'll see you guys.